How fast do you have to be going for death to become inevitable? Robert R.T. Smith is about to find out. 408 miles per hour. That's the speed displayed on his P-40 Warhawk's airspeed indicator, 40 miles per hour past the aircraft's official red line. That's the speed at which a Japanese bomber, massive and unavoidable, fills his windscreen. It's February 25th, 1942. Smith is 26 years old. He's been in combat for just 2 months. He's shot down 3 enemy aircraft. And in approximately 1.2 seconds, a 16,000-pound bomber is going to collide with his fighter at a combined speed that should vaporize both aircraft and everyone inside them. He can't pull up. He can't turn away. All he can do is grip the stick, brace for impact, and hope the shark teeth painted on his nose will do more than scare the enemy. In the half-second before impact, Smith's brain performs a calculation no training manual ever covered. At a combined closing speed of over 600 miles per hour, a head-on collision should have only one outcome: instantaneous death for both crews. 2 spiraling fireballs tumbling into the jungle 3 miles below. But Smith's P-40 isn't just any fighter. Painted on its nose in garish white and red are rows of jagged shark teeth, a design copied from RAF fighters in North Africa, meant to intimidate the enemy and boost morale. It's a paint job. A mascot. A psychological trick. In 3 seconds, those painted teeth are going to do something no one ever intended. They're going to save his life. The impact sounds like a freight train hitting a brick wall. Metal screams. Glass explodes. The entire aircraft convulses with a violence that nearly snaps Smith's neck. The control stick is ripped from his hands. The world becomes a spinning chaos of sky, earth, smoke, and the deafening roar of tortured aluminum. And then, silence. Relative silence. The engine is still running, the propeller is still turning, and impossibly, unbelievably, Robert Smith is still alive. He looks down. Wedged into the air intake of his P-40, jammed between the propeller spinner and the engine cowling, is a 4-foot section of the Japanese bomber's wing spar. It's embedded in the exact spot where the shark's mouth was painted. The impact hit the reinforced nose section, the heaviest, most structurally sound part of the entire aircraft. Inches higher, and it would have sheared through the thin aluminum canopy, decapitating him. Inches lower, and it would have destroyed the engine. But it hit the teeth, and the teeth, by sheer geometric accident, are painted over the strongest part of the P-40's fuselage. Smith is flying a fighter jet with a piece of enemy bomber stuck in its face like a toothpick, and he still has 200 miles of enemy territory to cross before he reaches home. This is not a story about luck. This is a story about a design feature no engineer intended, a paint scheme copied from another theater of war, and an aircraft everyone said was obsolete, proving that sometimes survival is a matter of millimeters and the strange mathematics of chaos. If this impossible story grabs you, tap subscribe. We bring you the untold moments where engineering, accident, and sheer human will collided to change history. To understand how Robert Smith ended up in a mid-air collision at 400 miles per hour, you have to go back 9 months. Back to a time when the P-40 Warhawk wasn't a legend. It was a reject. By mid-1941, the global consensus among aviation experts was clear. The Curtiss P-40 was a second-rate fighter, already obsolete before America even entered the war. In the skies over Europe, the Battle of Britain had been decided by Supermarine Spitfires and Hawker Hurricanes. The Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf 109 could climb faster, turn tighter, and fight at higher altitudes than the P-40 could ever dream of. German pilots who encountered P-40s exported to the British as Tomahawks dismissed them with contempt. Luftwaffe ace Hans-Joachim Marseille, 𝘂𝘍𝑗oachim Marseille, who would go on to shoot down 158 Allied aircraft, called the P-40 a heavy truck trying to fight a sports car. In North Africa, where the RAF deployed P-40s against the Afrika Korps, the results were mixed at best. The aircraft could absorb punishment, yes. It had decent firepower, but in a dogfight, a close-range, twisting, turning knife fight, it was hopelessly outmatched. The airplane had fundamental flaws. First, the engine struggled for air above 15,000 feet. The Allison FIV 1710 engine, lacking an effective supercharger, gasped for air at high altitude. German and British fighters fought at 25,000 to 30,000 feet. The P-40 couldn't even reach that altitude without struggling. Second, the aircraft climbed slowly. It took forever to gain altitude. In combat, altitude is energy. Energy life. The P-40 was always starting the fight from below. And finally, in a turning fight, lighter enemy fighters could run circles around it. At 7,000 pounds, it was heavy for a single-engine fighter. Light, agile aircraft like the Japanese A6M0 or the German Bf-109 could turn inside it with ease. The United States Army Air Corps knew all of this. They were already shifting production priorities to newer designs. The P-38 Lightning, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the P-51 Mustang. The P-40 was being phased out, relegated to training squadrons in secondary theaters. But there was a problem. In 1941, those advanced fighters weren't ready. The P-38 was still plagued with engine troubles. The P-47 hadn't even entered production. The P-51 existed only as a British export model. America had exactly one fighter aircraft it could produce in large numbers right now and ship overseas, the P-40. So when a stubborn, court-martialed ex-Army captain named Claire Chennault came calling with an insane proposal, the U.S. government gave him exactly what nobody else wanted: 100 obsolete P-40s, and permission to take them to the other side of the world to fight the best air force in Asia. Claire Chennault was not a man who accepted conventional wisdom. He had spent the 1930s arguing, loudly and insubordinately, that the Army Air Corps' obsession with heavy bombers was a strategic mistake. He believed in fighters. He believed in tactics. And when his superiors forced him into early retirement in 1937, officially for health reasons, unofficially for being an insufferable pain in the ass, he took his theories to the one place desperate enough to listen: China. By 1941, China had been at war with Japan for 4 years. The Chinese Air Force had been annihilated. Japanese bombers struck Chinese cities with impunity. The nationalist government, led by Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, was hemorrhaging territory and morale. They needed a miracle. Chennault offered them something cheaper: mercenaries. With quiet support from President Franklin Roosevelt, who wanted to bleed Japan without officially entering the war, Chennault was authorized to recruit American military pilots, have them resign from service, and form a private volunteer group to defend China. The pay was extraordinary: $600 per month, plus a $500 bonus for every Japanese aircraft destroyed. In 1941, that was a fortune. 100 pilots signed up. They were a mix of idealists, adventurers, and troublemakers. They boarded ships in San Francisco, traveling under false identities, their destination classified. When they arrived in Burma in the summer of 1941 and saw what they'd be flying, the reaction was less than enthusiastic. One pilot reportedly asked, "We're supposed to fight Zeros in these?" He was staring at the line of P-40B models sitting on the tarmac in Toungoo. Chennault was blunt. They were not going to fight Zeros the way they had been trained. They were going to fight them his way, and if they did it right, they would kill 10 of them for every one lost. He meant it. And over the next 7 months, he would prove it. Chennault's tactical doctrine was built on a simple recognition: you cannot win a game rigged against you. If the enemy's aircraft can outturn you, you don't turn. You change the game entirely. His rules were absolute and non-negotiable. Rule 1. Altitude is life. Always climb above the enemy before engaging. Use your early warning network to know when they're coming, and position yourself 5,000 feet above them before they arrive. Rule 2. Speed is survival. The P-40 is faster than a Zero in a dive. Use that. Attack from above in a high-speed slashing pass, then use your momentum to climb back to altitude, never ever slowed to dogfight. Rule 3. 1 pass, 1 kill. The P-40's 650 caliber machine guns deliver devastating firepower. If you can't kill the target in a single firing pass, you're doing it wrong. Don't spray. Aim. Shoot. Disengage. Rule 4. Work in pairs. One P-40 attacks. The other watches his back. If anyone breaks this rule, they're grounded. Rule 5. If you find yourself in a turning fight, you've already failed. break off, dive away, and live to fight another day. It was the opposite of everything romantic about aerial combat. It rejected the myth of the lone ace, twisting and turning in a heroic duel. It was cold, calculated, and it worked. While the pilots trained in tactics, the ground crews worked on the aircraft themselves. And that's where the shark teeth came in. No one is entirely sure who first proposed it. Some say it was a pilot named Eric Schilling, who had seen photographs of RAF P-40s in North Africa painted with shark mouths. Others say it was Chennault himself. What's certain is that in the fall of 1941, the ground crews at Toungoo began transforming the P-40s. Using whatever paint they could scrounge, they turned the aircraft's air intake into a gaping maw, rows of white teeth, a blood-red tongue, eyes that seemed to glare with predatory intent, the Chinese nationalist flag on the fuselage, and for the American pilots, personal nose art, names, kill tallies, good luck charms. The effect was immediate and unsettling. The P-40 no longer looked like a machine. It looked alive. It looked dangerous. The pilots loved it. The Chinese civilians who saw them fly overhead called them Fei Hu, flying tigers. But the shark teeth weren't just psychological. They were structural. The P-40's distinctive air intake, that massive scoop under the nose, required heavy reinforcement. The engineers at Curtiss had built a robust framework around it to handle the aerodynamic stresses of high-speed flight. That reinforcement extended into the lower nose cowling, creating one of the strongest sections of the entire airframe. When the ground crews painted the shark teeth, they were painting over that reinforced structure. The mouth of the shark was, unknowingly, a visual map of the P-40's most crash-resistant component. On February 25, 1942, that design quirk would be tested in the most violent way imaginable. By February 1942, the Flying Tigers were no longer an experiment. They were a proven force. In their first 2 months of combat, they had shot down over 100 Japanese aircraft while losing only 4 P-40s in air-to-air combat. Their tactics, Chennault's tactics, had turned P-40 into a killing machine. But the war was going badly. Hong Kong had fallen. Singapore was about to fall. The Japanese were advancing through Burma, cutting off the Burma Road, China's last supply lifeline to the outside world. If the road was severed, China would be strangled. On the morning of February 25th, Chennault received intelligence that a large Japanese formation, bombers and fighters, was heading for the Salween River Gorge, a critical choke point on the Burma Road. If the Japanese could destroy the bridges there, the road would be cut. Chennault scrambled every available P-40, 16 aircraft, divided into 4 flights. Robert R.T. Smith, a 26-year-old from California, was leading the second element of the first flight. Smith was not the flashiest pilot in the group. He wasn't an ace yet. But he was steady, disciplined, and he followed Chennault's rules to the letter. The P-40s climbed to 16,000 feet, positioning themselves in the sun, invisible to the Japanese formation approaching from the south. The early warning network had given them 30 minutes notice, enough time to gain the altitude advantage. Smith scanned the sky through his gun sight, and then he saw them. 12 Japanese Ki-21 Sally bombers, flying in tight formation at 12,000 feet, no fighter escort. The Japanese, supremely confident after months of unchallenged air superiority, had stopped sending escorts on some missions. It was a fatal mistake. The flight leader gave the signal. The P-40s rolled inverted and dove. Smith pushed the stick forward. The Allison engine roared. The airspeed needle climbed. 300 miles per hour, 350, 380. The P-40 was designed to dive. It was heavy, and gravity loved it. Smith felt the controls stiffen as he passed 400 miles per hour. The aircraft was approaching compressibility, the point where airflow over the wings becomes turbulent and control surfaces lose effectiveness. He didn't care. He had the lead bomber in his sights. At 400 yards, he opened fire. 650 caliber machine guns, synchronized, converging on a single point. Tracer rounds arced toward the bomber. He walked the stream of fire from the tail to the wing root, exactly as Chennault had taught him. The bomber's right engine exploded. Black smoke poured from the cowling. The formation broke apart in panic. but Smith was committed. He was diving too fast to pull up smoothly. He would pass directly through the formation. And that's when he saw it. One bomber, trying to evade, pulled up sharply. It was climbing directly into Smith's flight path. Smith had a fraction of a second to react. He could try to pull up, but at 400 miles per hour, pulling too hard would rip the wings off. He could try to roll away, but the bomber was too close, filling his windscreen. He did the only thing he could. He tightened his grip on the stick, braced for impact, and hoped. The collision happened at a combined speed of over 600 miles per hour. The P-40's nose struck the underside of the bomber's left wing, just outboard of the fuselage. In a normal aircraft, that impact would have been catastrophic. The nose of a fighter is designed to cut through air, not steel. It's streamlined, relatively fragile. A collision should have crushed the nose section, driven debris backward into the engine, shattered the propeller, and sent both aircraft into an uncontrollable spin. But Smith's P-40 wasn't normal. It had shark teeth. The impact occurred at the exact point where the P-40's air intake met the engine cowling, the reinforced structure the Curtiss engineers had built to handle high-speed airflow. The bomber's wing spar, a heavy I-beam of aluminum alloy, punched into the intake but was stopped by the framework behind it. The teeth painted over that reinforcement absorbed the impact. The collision did three things simultaneously. 1. It sheared off a 4-foot section of the bomber's wing. The bomber, suddenly asymmetric and uncontrollable, rolled violently to the left, shedding altitude. The Japanese crew, in the final seconds before the aircraft disintegrated, must have had no idea what hit them. One moment they were climbing. The next, their wing was gone and they were falling. 2. It jammed the debris, the wing spar, into Smith's air intake. The spar wedged itself between the propeller spinner and the nose cowling, effectively blocking a third of the intake. The engine, starved of cooling air, immediately began to overheat. Smith's temperature gauge redlined. 3. It bent the P-40's propeller, not enough to destroy it, but enough. The blades, hitting debris, were twisted out of alignment. The propeller now had a wobble, an imbalance that sent violent vibrations through the entire airframe. Smith wrestled with the controls. The stick fought him. The aircraft wanted to roll right, pulled by the torque of the damaged propeller. The engine was overheating, the oil temperature climbing toward the danger zone. He throttled back slightly, trying to balance cooling with the need for power. And he was still over enemy territory. The Salween Gorge was 200 miles behind him. His base at Kunming was 200 miles ahead. 400 miles. In a damaged aircraft, with Japanese fighters potentially scrambling from every direction. He keyed his radio. "Lead, this is Smith. I've had a collision. Aircraft is flyable, but damaged. Heading home alone." The flight leader's voice crackled back. "Copy. Smith. Can you make it?" Smith looked at his gauges. Oil temperature, red. Engine RPM, fluctuating. Airspeed, barely 180, far slower than normal. Every vibration from the bent propeller felt like the aircraft was going to shake itself apart. He responded, "I'll find out." The next 90 minutes were a test of endurance, both for the pilot and the machine. Smith nursed the crippled P-40 across the mountains of southern China, following valleys to stay low and avoid detection, constantly scanning the sky for Japanese fighters. The engine temperature kept climbing. He tried everything, adjusting the mixture, varying the throttle, even briefly shutting down and restarting the engine mid-flight to let it cool. Nothing worked. The blocked air intake meant the engine was cooking itself from the inside. He passed over small Chinese villages. Peasants looked up, seeing the shark-mouthed fighter limping through the sky, trailing a thin plume of smoke. Some waved. They knew that paint job. They knew it meant the Flying Tigers were fighting. 50 miles from Kunming, the engine began to miss. Rough running. A cylinder misfiring. Smith's hands were white-knuckled on the stick, coaxing the aircraft forward, willing it to stay in the air. 20 miles out, he saw the airfield. He keyed the radio. "Kunming Tower. This is Tiger 2-7. I'm coming in hot with battle damage. Declaring emergency." "Copy. 2-7. You're cleared to land. Fire crews standing by." Smith lined up on the runway. The P-40 with its damaged propeller wanted to veer right. He fought it, using rudder and aileron to keep the nose pointed straight. He cut the throttle. The engine, relieved of load, coughed and sputtered. The airspeed bled off. The P-40 touched down hard, bounced once, and settled onto the dirt strip. Smith stood on the brakes. The aircraft slewed slightly but held the runway. He rolled to a stop. He shut down the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming. He sat in the cockpit, his hands shaking from adrenaline, staring at the instrument panel. Alive. The ground crew arrived, running toward the aircraft. And then they stopped. They stared. Jammed into the nose of the P-40, protruding from the air intake like a grotesque trophy, was a 4-foot section of Japanese wing spar. Pieces of aluminum skin, still bearing the red circle insignia of the Japanese Army Air Force, were wrapped around it. And directly below that, untouched, pristine, the shark teeth grinned. The photographs taken that day became legendary. Smith's P-40, tail number P-8127, sitting on the flight line, with a piece of enemy bomber embedded in its face. The ground crews, grinning, standing next to it. Smith himself, looking exhausted and vaguely disbelieving, pointing at the debris. Chennault inspected the damage personally. He walked around the aircraft, running his hand along the fuselage, examining the impact point. The Curtiss engineers had built this section to withstand aerodynamic stress. They had never imagined it would have to withstand a 600-mile-per-hour collision with a bomber. Chennault asked, "How fast were you going?" Smith answered, 400, maybe a little more. Chennault shook his head. "You hit the one part of this aircraft that could take it. 6 inches higher, you'd be dead. 6 inches lower, the engine would be scrap. You hit the teeth." Smith looked at the shark mouth, now scarred and dented, but still recognizable. "The teeth saved me?" Chennault corrected him. "The reinforcement under the teeth saved you. But yes, the teeth." The story spread like wildfire through the Flying Tigers. Within days, every pilot knew. Smith had collided with a bomber at 400 miles per hour and lived. The aircraft that was supposed to be obsolete, too slow, too weak, had survived an impact that should have killed both pilot and plane. The Japanese heard the story too. Intelligence reports from captured documents and intercepted radio traffic revealed that Japanese pilots were increasingly rattled by the P-40s. They called them Fei-Hu, Flying Tigers, but also the planes that do not die. The image of the shark-mouthed fighter, indestructible, willing to ram enemy aircraft and survive, became a psychological weapon. Smith's P-40 was repaired. The wing spar was removed. The bent propeller was replaced. The dented nose cowling was hammered out, and the shark teeth were repainted, exactly as before. Within a week, Smith was flying it again. He would go on to score 9 confirmed aerial victories before the Flying Tigers disbanded in July 1942. He survived the war. He lived to be 91 years old, and for the rest of his life, when people asked him about the collision, he would tell them the same thing. "I didn't plan to hit that bomber. I didn't plan to survive." The P-40 did that. The engineers who built it, the ground crew who painted it, and about 1,000 pounds of luck. But mostly the P-40. The collision on February 25th, 1942, was not an isolated incident. It was a microcosm of everything the Flying Tigers proved about the so-called obsolete P-40 Warhawk. The aircraft had limitations, serious ones, but it also had strengths that, when exploited by smart tactics and skilled pilots, made it devastatingly effective. The rugged construction, the heavy armament, the ability to dive faster than the enemy, and, as Smith discovered, the structural integrity to survive impacts that would destroy lighter aircraft. By the time the Flying Tigers disbanded in July 1942, they had achieved a record that remains unmatched in the history of air warfare. 297 confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed. Some estimates, including probables and ground kills, push the number over 500. 14 pilots lost in combat, a kill ratio of over 20-1. They did it with an aircraft the experts said was second-rate. They did it by refusing to fight the enemy's fight. And they did it with a paint scheme, shark teeth on the nose, that became the most iconic image of American air power in World War II. The P-40 went on to serve in every theater of the war. In North Africa, it flew with the Desert Air Force. In the Pacific, it fought from New Guinea to the Aleutians. In the Soviet Union, over 2,000 P-40s were supplied under Lend-Lease, where Soviet pilots praised its ruggedness and hitting power. Over 13,700 P-40s were built, making it the third most produced American fighter of the war. It was never the best. But it was good enough. And in the hands of pilots who understood its strengths, it was far better than good enough. The shark mouth paint scheme didn't die with the Flying Tigers. It became a tradition. After World War II, U.S. Air Force units around the world adopted the design. A 10 Thunderbolt II Warthogs in the Gulf War wore shark teeth. F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam bore the same grinning maw. Modern F-15s and F-16s, flying in exercises and combat missions, still paint the teeth on their noses as a tribute. The design has transcended its origins. It's no longer just about the Flying Tigers or the P-40. It's a symbol of aggressive, in-your-face air power. It says, "We are predators, we are hunters, and we do not back down." But for those who know the history, the shark teeth mean something more. They're a reminder that sometimes the line between life and death is measured in inches. That a paint job meant to intimidate the enemy can coincidentally mark the one part of an aircraft strong enough to survive the impossible. That engineering, accident, and human courage can combine in ways no one predicts. Robert Smith's P-40, with a piece of Japanese bomber jammed in its teeth, is a perfect metaphor for the entire story of the Flying Tigers. Outmatched on paper, written off by experts, but tougher, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone expected. Robert Smith returned to the United States in 1942. He joined the U.S. Army Air Forces and continued flying, eventually transitioning to P-51 Mustangs. He flew combat missions in the China-Burma-India theater until the end of the war. After the war, he became a test pilot and aviation artist. His paintings of the Flying Tigers, vivid, dynamic depictions of shark-mouthed P-40s diving on Japanese formations, hang in museums and private collections around the world. He never forgot February 25, 1942. In interviews decades later, he would describe the collision in precise technical detail. The sound, the impact, the moment of realization that he was still alive. In a 1990 interview, he said, "People asked me if I was scared. Of course I was scared. But fear is just information. It tells you you're in danger. It doesn't tell you what to do. Training tells you that." And the P-40 did the rest. Smith died in 2009 at the 91. He was one of the last surviving Flying Tigers. At his funeral, a formation of vintage P-40s flew overhead, shark teeth gleaming in the California sun. The story of the P-40 and the Flying Tigers is not a story of technological superiority. It's a story of tactical innovation, disciplined execution, and the intelligent exploitation of an aircraft's strengths. The Germans were right. The P-40 was slower than a Bf-109. It couldn't dogfight with a Zero. On paper, it was obsolete. But wars are not fought on paper. They're fought in the air, at 400 miles per hour, with seconds to make decisions and millimeters between survival and death. And in that environment, the obsolete P-40, flown by pilots who refused to play by the enemy's rules, became one of the most successful fighters of the war. The shark teeth didn't make the P-40 invincible, but they marked the spot where, just once, in a collision no one could have predicted, the aircraft's hidden strength saved a man's life. That's not a miracle. That's engineering. That's luck. And that's the strange, brutal mathematics of war, where the difference between a legend and a statistic can be measured in the width of a paint stroke. If this story of impossible survival and tactical brilliance stayed with you, hit subscribe. We uncover the forgotten moments where engineering, human will, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to die changed the course of history. The P-40 Warhawk wasn't supposed to win, but it did. And those shark teeth, they're still grinning.